A few years ago, I had the misfortune of breaking my neck in a mountain biking accident in New Zealand. In a pretty ironic turn of events, I ended up filming my entire recovery and making an award-winning documentary about it. This is the story of what happened and what it taught me. Hi, my name is Themistocles, and I'm a filmmaker, and I like to play hockey and snowboard a lot. A few years ago, I made a short film about a friend of mine who broke his back paragliding and won first prize at a short film festival. The prize was a mountain bike season pass for the awesome Queenstown Bike Park. So I bought myself a fancy bike until one day, I flew off my bike and straight into a tree. About an hour later, I had some x-rays taken and was relieved to find out that only my collarbone was broken and that my neck, although really stiff, was just sprained. After a second diagnosis confirmed this, I went to my chiropractor to loosen me up a little bit. About a week later, I went back for a routine checkup at the hospital, where the doctor once again assured me that my neck was just sprained and I was going to be great for the Hockey World Championships I was playing in 2 weeks. Later on that day, though, I got a phone call that changed everything. But let's back up a little bit. I was born in San Francisco, raised in Athens, Greece, and went to university in the UK. I ended up in New Zealand playing ice hockey for the Greek national ice hockey team in the Division III World Championships. After finishing the contest, a team from a small town up in the mountains called Queenstown ended up drafting me, and I started playing for their team completely on a whim. Never really planned it that way. So I get to Queenstown, this incredibly beautiful town up in the mountains that was an extreme sports mecca. I don't know if anyone here has heard about it. It's where bungee jumping was invented, and everybody rides around on mountain bikes and floating skateboards and stuff. So it was basically paradise for me. Soon after I got there, I started working for the bungee jumping company that pretty much started the whole thing, AJ Hackett, as a photographer. And that's also where I met Glenn Leggett, or Legs, a friend and colleague of mine that would shape and influence my life in way more ways than he ever expected. Legs was the kind of guy who would pretty much do anything. He was a pro snowboarder, a general outdoorsman, and unfortunately had a terrible paragliding accident a few years before I met him. He fell 60 meters from his paraglider and broke his back in almost the entire length down his back, and was left paralyzed for about 2.5 months from the waist down. After a lot of physiotherapy and a few years of getting himself back on his feet, when I met him, he was back up to doing everything he used to do, snowboarding, mountain biking, surfing, all with a few little hacks to make them work. So I decided to make a short film about him.
Just trying to push the boundaries a little bit too far, and I paid the price. Broke my back and was paralyzed from the waist down for over 2.5 months, which was pretty much the scariest thing I've ever done to myself. I still can't feel parts of my body. I still can't feel in my right foot. I can't feel from about my shin down, and then my left leg I can't feel from my knee up into my waist, which is pretty strange, but just had to make adjustments by joining 2 snowboard boots together. I had to just put a toe clip on the foot I can't feel so it doesn't fly off the pedal. These are the 2 pads that stop my foot and basically bring it into the centre, which, without them I'm retarded at surfing, but with these it makes all the difference.
Meanwhile, at the same time, I was raising money through crowdfunding to make a documentary about the Greek national ice hockey team returning to South Africa almost 20 years after going there originally and winning a bronze medal in their first ever international appearance back in the early 90s. I was also playing for the national team, so I was training about 5 times a week just to make sure I was keeping in shape. And, so the obvious thing to do was get my bicycle, head down to the bike track, and try out the new trails. So one day, that's exactly what I did. And I went a little too far sideways off one of the jumps and torpedoed headfirst into this tree right here. I landed in the bushes on the side of the tree, and after realizing that I hadn't lost consciousness, I gave myself the old pinch test just to make sure that I could still feel everything. Another rider helped me up onto the side of the track, and after a short rest, I got back on my bicycle and cycled home to get my girlfriend to go to the local clinic and get some x-rays taken. After taking some x-rays and finding out that my neck was in fact just sprained and not broken, I kept my focus on the hockey. After 2 doctors and a chiropractor assured me that my neck was definitely just sprained, I went in for another routine checkup about 2 weeks after the original accident, and again got discharged with just a sprained neck. I was on the bus ride home when I got that phone call. It turns out they had sent the x-rays down to a bigger hospital for a second opinion, and something wasn't quite right. So they hurried me in for a CAT scan, and just as things started to get a little bit more dramatic, while I was lying on my back in the machine, the radiologist pokes his head out from behind the protective glass and says something I'll never forget. "So, did you walk here?" Obviously, I'm sure you can understand that was probably the scariest moment of my life. But finally, I had a correct diagnosis. It turns out I had what's called a Jefferson fracture. It was a bilateral burst fracture of my C1 atlas ring. Basically, my skull had compressed my first vertebrae during the impact with the tree and popped it open in 2 places. But my neck muscles were strong because I was in training and had managed to keep it protected. In fact, so protected that none of the x-rays could actually reveal what was happening. So they told me my options were either to have spinal fusion, an incredibly invasive and complicated procedure whereby they go through your mouth into the back of your skull and fuse your skull to your first and second vertebrae, leaving you almost certainly with a hoarse voice and incredibly limited motion in your neck for the rest of your life. My second option was to get a halo, and obviously neither of them sounded particularly appealing, so that night I spent the night with my head taped to the bed and slightly more worried than I look in this picture. The next morning, they figured the halo would do the trick, luckily for me. So they got out their power tools and screwed 4 screws into my skull while I was awake, attaching with them the most medieval contraption I've seen in the last 400 years. Funny enough, though, the question at the back of my head was, what about this documentary I'm supposed to be making? So the next day, I got my camera out and pretty much just started filming everything. Nobody had ever guaranteed exactly what the outcome of the procedure was going to be, so I wasn't even entirely sure what I was filming at the time, but it just seemed natural, so I kept going with it. The first couple of weeks were definitely pretty weird. With the mobility restrictions, not being able to take a shower properly, having to clean my wounds every day. I mean, my girlfriend basically became my nurse. I had to learn how to put my clothes on under the vest, how to go to sleep on my back with the halo on. I had to learn how to wash my armpits so I don't asphyxiate my housemates, and just get used to spending a lot of time at home. Even going to the bathroom became pretty tricky because I couldn't really aim anymore. The thing that really kept me going, though, was my daily filming tasks, which included finding new and awesome ways to attach cameras to my fancy new camera rig on my head. I did go through some constructive processes, though, at least. I learned a lot about nutrition and food. I had to play around with some 3D graphics and played some pretty rockin' tunes out on the computer. It's safe to say that these activities were definitely what kept me sane, as I slowly added anxiety attacks, depression, blood clots, and a complete lack of independence to my list of problems. I finally got discharged after almost 3 months of wearing the halo 24/7 and had absolutely no idea what condition I was going to be in.
Was I going to be able to move my neck? Was my head going to flop around like a rubber chicken?
How are you feeling?
Pretty weird. Just had the halo taken off and the jacket. Just giving myself a nice hug. All right. It's been
2.5 months since I've been able to put a t-shirt on, or a hoodie, or anything with sleeves. I mean, going home. And I finally put a hoodie on, and it feels amazing. I totally took sleeved clothing for granted. Never again. Never again.
It was now June, and the Adventure Film Festival was on in August. So it was a couple months away. And that's really what gave me the drive to make the movie in the first place. It took me about a month to piece together the footage and submit it to this film festival. Obviously, submitting it to the same film festival competition that I had submitted my previous film to was hilarious to begin with, much less the fact that it was a pretty dire sequel. So I thought it would be pretty funny if it won. And it did. And the prize was the same mountain bike pass to the same mountain bike park. So after about 3 minutes on stage saying thank you, I sold the mountain bike pass to my housemate and really good friend Dave, who had lived through the entire thing with me too. Luckily, he never hurt himself too bad with it. Video, please.
Would I be able to snowboard or play hockey again? The ride back to Queenstown was different this time. I felt different. It was like I was satisfied, but also eager to start planning the next adventure. I wasn't thinking about mountains or ice rinks, though. This time I was thinking about the steps back to normality. Going back to work, taking a full shower, walking down the street incognito, and giving my girlfriend a little bit of love. I knew it wasn't going to be easy or fast, but I felt I had a new appreciation for life and what it means to me. Aside from some minor physical restrictions, the long-term effects of this experience lie more inside my head than anywhere else. I'm going to have to calm it down a little from now on and just really assess the risks I take in life. Legs said it best. Things always go pear-shaped when you least expect it, and the boundary's always a little closer than what you think it is. Just when you think you've got things figured out, when your life has taken a good course and things settle into serenity, something gets thrown into the mix that'll turn that all upside down. A very smart man once told me, it's not about how hard you fall, but how fast you get back up. Would I have done anything differently? Probably not. I get high off adrenaline. I get excited by risk. I feel compelled to explore my boundaries and learn my limitations. I feel lucky to have lived the life I have so far, to have met the people I've met and seen the things I've seen.
I now live in Greece again, in the neighborhood where I grew up, hanging out with my best buddies, and still skating. I guess I can say it's the natural cycle of things. Luckily, I can still play hockey, and in fact I do, every single Friday night. I also coach a kids team on the weekends, and I still snowboard as much as I can too. I also still make films. I recently finished my first feature documentary about snowboarding in the Greek mountains.
I've just spent a season getting to know my own backyard. And what have I learned? We're lucky to live in one of the best playgrounds in the world.
A truly eye-opening experience that taught me that Greece is more than just nudist beaches and fried calamari. This never began as an inspirational story. It was never supposed to be one. I'm really glad that people see it that way, but it could have definitely got the other way too. I guess the message here is that everyone goes through moments of pain and frustration and failure in their lives. It's just really up to you how you're going to handle it. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's to embrace the irony of life. It definitely makes for better stories. Thank you.